Welcome to Page One, the show for writers with the reader in mind. Here's your host, Zita Christian.
Hi everyone, welcome to Page One. I'm Zita Christian. My guest tonight is a multi-talented woman. She is a freelance writer with more than 100 articles and short stories published. She's been a pastoral minister for over 10 years. She's a multi-published novelist, and she has a new series, or a new book in a series, that we're going to talk about tonight. The series is called The Menopause Murders. And I am delighted to introduce you to my friend, Ellie Sullo. Ellie, thanks very much for being on the show tonight.
I'm so glad to be here.
You know, I know that sometimes writers kind of roll their eyes a little bit at the cliched question of where do you get your ideas, but I have to ask, a series called The Menopause Murders, where'd the idea come from?
Well, Zita, that question about where you get your ideas always strikes me as the wrong one.
Yeah.
I think the question should be, what do you do with all the ideas that go flitting through your head?
Yeah.
How do you know which ones to put on the page?
Good point.
So I had an idea that so many of our heroines in our books are young women.
Yes.
And I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at older women, even in romance situations or in retirement situations. So I wondered if that would work. I thought, let me try putting the characters on a page and see if it would. And so I started with Ada, who happens to be the heroine of our novel that we're discussing tonight. Mm-hmm. And she worked for me. And so I began building each character up on a sheet. You know, what color eyes did they have? What was their temperament like? And yes, some of them did remind me of people I knew. Not wholesale, but just a little bit.
Uh-huh. So, of the three books, the third book out just very recently, the title is Hurdles.
Right.
Now, what's Hurdles about?
Hurdles is about the horse world in a sense. It's about Ada, who was wealthy enough to own horses and cottages and in Miami Beach and, you know, all kinds of goodies that most people wish they could own. But Ada's horse gets in trouble, and the next step is that the trainer of the horse is found in a very bad situation, dead.
That's pretty bad.
Yep. It goes from there. Ada wants to solve the crime, and she wants to make her horse well because he fell in a demonstration, in a competition, and her friends immediately gather around her to help her do this.
Okay, so we have a horse world. Does the story take place in the United States or someplace else?
It starts in the United States. I think I actually used the Farmington Polo Grounds as one of my sites, which is a local horse place. Mm-hmm. And I used the dressage type of competition where people do certain jumps and leaps and certain kind of gallop. My niece was very into that, so I had a little knowledge about it, very little. And I got more from some good friends in the group that we'll talk about later.
Yes.
So that part was okay. That's in the United States, locally to me. And then, of course, they have to travel because the women in these books travel. They're not sitting home in their rocking chairs. They're moving out.
Good.
So we go to England, where there is truly a place that says they can fix your horse that has this particular ailment. They decide to go there as a group, and they happen to rent a haunted house, and that's another part of the story.
Now, do they know the house is haunted?
They've heard that, but it doesn't bother them too much because they say, you know,
oh, it's England. They're all haunted. I bet.
yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, I want to get a shot of the cover of Hurdles here.
Sure.
We'll pick it up here on the other camera.
Okay.
But I know from our talks earlier, the haunted house that's up in the corner of the book cover. I mean, that is a real haunted house, is it not?
Yes, it is, and that's truly a photograph of the house, of part of the house.
And I understand that you spoke with another press about the haunted house. What was that all about? Or not a press, but was it a television or radio interview?
Yes, it was a television interview. Joe and my husband and I went there and stayed in an apartment in the haunted house.
Oh,
to test out what it's like to sleep there.
Ellie, what
there.
great research.
Yeah, on the job research,
Yeah.
right. And I must say, when we both sat bolt upright in bed at the exact same moment, midnight, I'd heard certain noises, we decided there was something to it. And there was no one else in the building. The building was locked, and we were the only ones there.
And did you stay another night?
Ghosts. We did, yes. We've
brave.
gone back 3 times, and we're going again in the fall.
My God, same place?
Yes, yes.
Good for you.
Yes.
Good for you. And so who interviewed you?
It was just a BBC One team that came out and interviewed me in the room where the noises had emanated from. And we talked about some elements in the room that could make the noise. And I sat, at their insistence, on a 500-year-old bedspread on a beautiful, I don't know, Edwardian bed, I guess it was. And I felt like I belonged there. To me, it feels like another home now. I love going back.
Maybe in another life. I mean,
Maybe.
who knows?
Yeah,
Who
maybe
knows?
that was the attraction.
Yeah. Well, now Hurdles is the 3rd book in the series, but there are
Right.
2 books previous to that,
Right.
Hostage and Harem. So what are those 2 books about? And who are well, you call them the
Heroines or
the
main
women on
characters.
fire?
The women on fire,
Women
right.
on fire.
Yeah.
Menopause. Oh, I love this. Okay. So tell me about Hostage and Harem.
Okay. Well, Hostage is the first book in the series.
Okay.
And in it, the group decides to get together. So it's kind of the birth story of the women on fire, as they call themselves. And in it, there's a young woman who's a journalist. Well, not a young woman a little bit past young. All the women are. They've seen a lot of life, let's put it that way. And this woman in particular is a journalist, and she's traveled all around doing her stories. But she's deathly afraid of flying. So that becomes a big element. She's asked to go to Afghanistan to interview a local doctor. She can't do it, so she quits her job at the Current. And she's kind of at loose ends. Well, there's a murder in her friend's home, so she especially gets involved in the murder and solving the murder, and happens to meet a very handsome, younger detective who has his eye on her as well. So you can tell that there might be some romance going on.
So you have a little May-December romance
a little
going on
bit,
here too. So you've got a
bit.
mystery series, got a
Yeah.
little romance going on, got foreign travel.
Yep. Each book has another country or part of the United
nice.
States.
Okay, so that's Hostage.
That's Hostage.
And then what is Harem about?
Harem is about the woman called Lucia, who's kind of the mamma mia of the group. She loves everybody and wants to solve all their problems. She's also a wonderful cook, which is why she's pictured in an apron on the front of the book. And she longs to have her own restaurant. Her husband tells her, that's going to happen. We're going to get you your own restaurant. But in the meantime, all his interests come first. Now she's at the point where she feels like their perfect marriage has a few crumbling edges. But she devotes herself to her mother-in-law, who's telling her very wild stories about the nursing home she lives in. And sure enough, something in the nursing home demands attention. I won't repeat it again, but every book has one of these incidents.
Okay.
So the women on fire decide to join Lucia and find out what's going on in the nursing home.
Oh, okay. So they're all having their own adventures.
They
now,
are.
The heroine of Hostage, what is her name?
Her name is Hannah.
So you have Hannah and Lucia and Ada.
And Ada.
Now, are these characters modeled? Well, I know you said earlier that not fully modeled on anyone in real life, but do you draw from real life when you create your characters?
I do. In fact, I guess I should admit, I belong to a group of women. I won't name the organization, but there's a certain color chapeau that must be worn. And I go to the meetings, and this group of women are so alive and so vibrant. And I think you have to be 60 or over 55 to join. So these aren't chicks, these are older women.
Yeah.
And they're all wonderful. They're vital and they're interesting. So I remember coming home one day and thinking, so-and-so would make a good character in a book. And so-and-so would be a good character in the book. And I think that's when I had the first inkling of a book about women at that stage in life, the Menopause Murders.
Are these women married? Well, the one of them is Lucia, because her husband...
Yep, and
you're talking
Hannah's
about the
a
restaurant.
widow, and Ada is also a widow.
Oh, okay.
And then there's a divorced woman, there's another happily married woman, and an ex-nun in the convent 38 years who just came out and used an internet dating service to find her love of her life.
Oh,
so
well, I want to know what are her parameters
they're
for...
quite a mixed crew.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So tell me, one of the things that always occurs to me, because when I read books in a series, how does the writer keep track of everything? I mean, I assume because of the title, The Menopause Murders, that you knew from the beginning this was to be a series. So what did you do? What format or what process or program do you use to keep track of everything?
Well, I'm an intuitive person than one who keeps careful records or outlines carefully. So that has held me in good stead. But I do, as I mentioned earlier, have a page, 2 pages really, on every one of the characters. And some of them, if I'm not sure what they're like or who they are, I interview them in my head and on my computer. And I get loads of information from that. And I keep all those papers. And I do refresh my mind when I'm working on a new book, like I am now with the new book I'm working on.
Oh, what's the new book?
The new book is Menopause Murders, and I think the next word is Havoc, because it's about the, I don't want to say ditzy, but about the blonde woman in the story who's kind of a Goldie Hawn look-alike and act-alike, if you get that picture. And she's a sweetheart, she's an artist, she's lovely, but she's full of malapropisms, if I'm saying that right. And she finds herself always being chased by the younger men they meet. So Hannah's not the only one with a younger man who she sticks with. But this lady, Dory, also has that effect on younger men. So every country they go to, and in Dory's, they'll go to France. We're not quite there yet in the story, but they're going.
So your husband, Joe, are you and Joe going to go to France to do some research?
Actually, we are. You caught me.
I love it. Because I always wonder, does the writer, how do you do the research for a place? And I know for me, my comfort level, I guess I could write about a place I hadn't been, but I haven't yet. I always write about some place I've traveled to, and sometimes that creates a great excuse to take a trip.
Yeah,
so for you, does the trip come first and it's a matter of, wow, this is a very interesting, rich place in which to set a story, or is it a matter of this particular story is going to be in France, so let's make sure the passport's valid?
Yeah. Well, I think I probably set the story in the particular setting, having been there once in this particular. Like Harem, a big chunk of the story takes place in Italy. It happens to be in the town that we visited, near the place where we stayed. So yes, the visit comes first, and then, of course, there's work to do to make sure you get everything right.
Oh, sure.
That you name the church correctly, that you name the butcher shop correctly. And with the France picture, we've been to Provence before a couple times, and so it was a natural place for Dory. She's always had a French last name, and I didn't know it, but she was planning to go to Provence all along.
Well, there you go.
She's got a grandmother in Provence who just died and left her a bunch of furniture and other things, valuables. So, of course, she's going to France. But we're going to beat her there and do a little more research.
So, does your husband help you on the research when you're on these trips?
Yes, he does.
So what does he do?
Well, for example, as part of the research for Dory's book, I mean, this was before I knew Dory, but I knew this was a place I wanted to write about. We were in a place in France where the headquarters of the French Foreign Legion sits. And the town is called Aubagne. And the French Foreign Legion has had that as their home for, I guess, decades and decades. So I said to Joe, I'd love to go there, but I don't know if they let women in, for one thing. And maybe an accompanied woman with a man at her side could do well there. So he looked up a lot of stuff, and we went there together. And he was very fascinated with all the armaments and the military things that were around us. And we could see the parade ground outside the window, where there were people marching and doing whatever. And as we walked closer to the parade ground, some gentlemen came over in their uniforms and dropped a big curtain in front of us. So it was like, oh, that's it. Oh. He said, no, in French. And we said, oh. I said, no pictures. He said, no see with his eyes. Oh. So that was a little tough, but we were allowed to stay inside this museum area, and that's where we did our research, basically. And we also have a friend over there who has a friend who is a former French Foreign Legionnaire.
You have to have those little connections. You got to get those details.
He's going to clear me on when I put this in the
Ellie,
story.
Good. Yeah. That is really good. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk, especially with you about tonight, you know, writers all the time now, I mean, the word platform comes up all the time. A writer has to have a platform. You need a website. You need a social presence. You need a blog. And publishers don't put marketing, or very little marketing energy into a book unless it's the one at the top of the list. So right. A lot of that, all of it, falls to the writer.
Right.
And the first thing I think of is, well, I want to go check your website. Mm-hmm. It is so clever. I love how it is set up. Thanks. So where most websites would have, you know, about me and contact information and maybe about the book or market or something like that, but yours is organized in a different way. Could you tell us a little bit about that organization?
Yes. I had the thought that the rooms of a house would make interesting pages or sections of a website. I spend a lot of time at home writing, but also gardening and doing other things with the family. So I thought, well, each room could represent some facet of my life. Obviously, the library would be my books. Mm-hmm. The kitchen would be where I cook, and there's a lot of cooking stuff on the website.
Well, in your work as a freelance writer, there was a strong focus on food.
Yes.
I mean, that's a big part of your writing background.
It is, that's right. And I still do a column on food for a small newspaper. But I contacted a person who had the technical know-how. And I said, is this possible? And she said, I think it's a great idea.
Very clever.
And she helped me build the rooms of that house. And, of course, the front porch was where we keep our suitcases because we want to be on the road.
Yeah,
and she
all
loved
the
that.
travel.
So we have travel pictures in there, too, and travel articles. Yeah.
I want to focus specifically on the blog. I know that, among other things, you talk about raising a family, but there are a lot of subjects on the blog, and I'm laying the groundwork for a blog myself, but I'm not there just yet. I will be shortly. How difficult is it to maintain a blog?
I don't really have a separate blog. My bloggish type of thing is the messages that I can put across on the website. So technically, I don't have a blog yet. I'm at the same point you're at.
Okay.
I'm working on it and looking for help. But in the website itself, that is easy. The only problem that lacks is time, because I'd like to keep it fresh. For example, I do a piece in there about gardening, and we do organic gardening, and we have for over 30 years. And I'm trying to give tips to people, especially in these days when we worry about where our food comes from.
No kidding.
You know, so I'm trying to encourage people to buy local, to even grow a little bit of their food, and all that takes space and time. And I love doing it. I try to recommend books that they should read and where they should go for help. But I want to refresh that. I don't want to leave just that same information on the page. So I try to go back, and that's where time is short.
Yes, because then you're also writing and you're
That's right.
researching and you're
Yeah.
marketing
That's
the book
marketing,
and,
right.
and coming on and doing shows like this. I want to talk about one particular entry
Okay.
that you have, and this one is one, I believe the title was Yes You Can, and it's all about encouraging children that yes, you can do this, as opposed to praising them for every little thing, but encouraging them to do the things that are really difficult.
Yeah.
And I thought, how would you take that advice and apply it to writers?
Yeah, good question, Zita. I think that doing is the best way that writers gain confidence. So to say yes, you can, I think a nice thing for someone who's already a writer is to mentor a new writer by saying, hey, how about just writing this, or writing me a letter, or writing a description of the last place you visited on vacation, and just get your feet wet, and let's exchange these things together. So that would be one thing I would do. Another would be to suggest that they join an existing writers group. There are some really good ones around.
Perfect segue, because are you a member of a critique group, and what writers groups do you belong to?
I was a member of a critique group. We took a course, this group of us, at Hartford College about 15 years ago. And I suggested afterward that I invited 5 of the people to stay together for a critique group, and that we met every week on Tuesday nights and read each other or listened to each person read some portion of what they'd written. And we had a great time, and I think we did help each other grow. Also, I do belong to 2 local romance writer groups, the Charter Oak Romance Writers, that meets mostly in Glastonbury and sometimes in South Windsor. And
First Saturday of the month?
Yes, first Saturday of the month. And the Connecticut Romance Writers, which meets the second Saturday of the month. I'm not sure of the location because I haven't been there in a while and they've changed.
I think they went to North Haven,
Okay.
but I'm not positive that that's still the location.
And I also joined Connecticut Authors and Publishers Association, CAPA for short, which has a tremendous group of, I would say, those newer writers who are just learning, who are just wanting to say, I'm a writer, I have something published. And it's great to see their enthusiasm.
Yes. So tell me a little about the publishing process that you went through for these books.
Well, around the time I started trying to find a publishing home for my books, which was, I would say, around 2000, around that time, I heard that publishing on demand was getting really big, which meant that the books would not be published until someone ordered them.
So there's no inventory to worry about.
Right. And that they would also be published digitally, or electronically, so there would be no inventory there, and the books would cost less than a paper book. So I checked out a few of those that I found on my Google research, and I chose the particular one that agreed to do my series, Wings Press. And they have been great. They'll let me write whatever I want. They give you an editor who's very polished and very erudite, and you work with that editor all through. And then you work with a copy editor who double checks everything. So it's been a really good experience. I'm glad I went with them. I've gone with some other publishers along the way too, and some of them have been fine. All of them really. But this one wanted the series, and they've been promoting the series a little bit, so it's been very helpful.
Good. So let's talk a little bit more about promoting the series. What kind of things are you doing, or have you done in the past with maybe the first 2 books? Because we need to be so creative nowadays in order to get the word out.
Yeah. Well, we talked about setting, and I think setting is important to me because it can then be a tool in your marketing.
Yes.
So my first book was set in England, and it was about the very same haunted house that Hurdles takes place in. So when the book was, well, I had to get permission from them, first of all, to use the place and describe it.
Oh.
And so I had to write to the gentleman who was the owner at the time, and he said, great, I'm glad you're doing it. I walk through that house in the particular room, and I get cold chills every time. There's something there. But he was a colonel in the Army, and he wouldn't talk anymore about it. He was a stiff upper lip guy. But that encouraged me. That gave me permission to go ahead.
Sure.
So now they sell my books in their gift shop.
Oh, how wonderful.
They sell the first one, and this year we're going there to bring a carton full of hurdles.
Signed by the author?
Yeah.
Yes.
They have loads of people that come in on bus tours, and some of them will buy the books. They're very interested, especially when they see a picture of the very same place on the cover. So that's one thing I've done, is to capitalize on the setting. Also, if my groups are having any sort of author promotion, like Kappa often does, 2 weeks ago we gathered around the old Mystic Village. There were, I think, 40 authors there, and we sold our books I sold at the country store, which was fun because there were kids coming for cotton candy and popcorn and all sorts of things. And quite a few people did sell quite a few books. You know, that was a good way to get out there and meet the public.
And you do. You have to get out. And the days of doing book signings in the bookstores, although there still are some of those, but not as much anymore. Not as much.
I just put a phone call into someone today. I'm keeping fingers crossed that they'll let me do one. But also library talks.
The library talks, yes,
are good. There's a group of writers that meet in my library, and they always support anything I do. So we kind of started out together, and so those 10 or 15 people will come, and they'll bring friends. And so that's a good piece.
Ellie, do you have children?
I do.
All right, I only have about less than a minute left, but I do want to ask, what's the children's reaction when they say, oh, my mom's a writer and she writes this series of Menopause Mysteries or Menopause Murders? What's the reaction?
Well, the female child is all for it. She can't wait to get her hands on any new book that comes out of the box. My son, however, won't read them because he doesn't want to know what his mother thinks about, quote unquote. When I wrote a memoir about our family, he begged me to change my name on the cover and not have his name. So I did. I used my maiden name.
That's great. Well, you know, maybe we'll come back sometime and we'll talk about the whole memoir process. But in the meantime, time is up, unfortunately. Okay. And I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk about this. Thanks very much for being on the show.
Oh, you're so welcome. I loved it.
And let me also thank my crew. And I'll close again with the words of the fantasy writer Ursula Le Guin, who said, "There have been civilizations that did not use the wheel, but there have been no civilizations that did not tell stories. So find your story and find a way to tell it. But do join us again next time. Thank you."
Food for the crew and guests was provided by Manchester Grill of Manchester, Connecticut, and Angelo's Restaurant of Glastonbury, Connecticut. Be sure to send your writing questions and your comments on the book club selection to Zita at page 1, P.O. Box 1515, Manchester, Connecticut, 06045-1515, or send an email to Zita at page1tv.com.